Welcome to the Not Supposed to Know podcast. This space has been created by artists Billie and Rob White from the hilly heart of Mid Wales. As artists, we both have an interest in the two related concepts of the unknown and the metaphysical, and how we can creatively access these spaces beyond everyday experience and understanding. We'd love to have conversations with as many like-minded creatives and other interesting folk about how the unknown, or what we are not supposed to know, impacts how they work. Hello, it's Billie and Rob, and we're in our secret hide again, just because it's got nice acoustics for us to have a chat, and it's a good excuse to get away from the daily grind. So we're going to be talking about the amazing opportunity to show our films as part of Seeing in the Dark curated exhibition by Inga Burrows at the Bath Fringe Festival. So to give you a little bit of an introduction into that, there was a selection process, and we were really privileged to be chosen, both myself and Rob White. And the programme of short films was about illuminating how contemporary artist-filmmakers from culturally diverse backgrounds respond creatively to their own and others' experiences of loss and grief. Each film offers a unique insight into this universal experience of complex emotions, and the films vary in duration from 48 seconds to 16 minutes. They are probing, inventive, insightful, moving, and ultimately uplifting. So we're doing this so that we can have a little bit of chat about our films, as a lot of people weren't able to get to the screenings, and so they can have a little look at our films online and then listen to this if they want a little bit more information about where we were coming from when we were making our films. The artists were put into groups, and our group was Nimi Nado, apologies if I say that wrong, Jonathan Bauer, Oscar Netherway, Alison Carter, myself, Jonathan Offrath, and Rob White. And we all sort of adopted a minimalist approach to expressing the expanse and nuance of the impact that loss can have on us. So that was the sort of category our little group were put under. A little bit about Inga. This is an extension of a previous curation, I think, that she put together in Wales, actually, about an exhibition about loss and grief and works relating to that. Inga Burrows, excuse me, have a quick lovely cup of char, hang on. Okay, so Inga Burrows is an artist and filmmaker educator working in higher education, whose practice over the past 3 decades has led to her instigating creative research projects in different social and academic contexts, including artist residencies in workplace settings, collaborating both with real and fictionalised communities, interdisciplinary practice as research, collaborations with higher education colleagues working in drama and music. In 2023, Inga left her teaching post to focus on developing her career as an artist, filmmaker and curator. And with funding from the Arts Council Wales and in partnership with Art Central Gallery in Barry, Inga co-curated the At a Loss exhibition. So if you want to check that out for a bit of background, in autumn 2023. So that was the At a Loss exhibition at the Art Central Gallery in Barry. We'll try and find the links for those as well. I think Instagram, it's At a Loss Art is Inga Burrows and that work. So Rob, you had two films selected by Inga Burrows for the Bath Fringe, and do you want to tell us just a bit about how you came to work in film rather than painting or illustration or one of your other methods?
And first, a big thank you to Inga Burrows for curating the show and for selecting my works. The two that were selected were Eidolon 1 and Eidolon 3 animations.
What does Eidolon mean?
Eidolon means spectre or phantom in substantiated form.
Okay.
It's got various meanings, but I think that's the bit I honed in on.
Yep.
I've got a history of working as an animator. I've animated websites before for clients on my commercial side and animated more figurative artworks in the past. And it was after working for a couple of years on the master's programme at Aberystwyth that I realised my paintings were doing something, and I'd reached a certain point where I thought there's an extra dimension to these works that needs to be explored, and that was motion.
Yeah, it's interesting because those paintings, you probably put a selection with this recording actually for people to have a look at, but they go quite well with the animations, don't they? And the fact that you're kind of sucked into those static images, and I can see you kind of understand why that was the next step really when you look at those images.
Yeah, it was something towards the end of the master's programme that I thought I needed to explore. I didn't have much time, so to produce just 3, it's quite a lengthy process, even though they're only 1 minute 20 seconds long each. Most of the components of the animations were bits of painting and hand-drawn marks that were digitised, and then it's a layering process. It's a bit like painting really, but in a digital form, but obviously it was moving. There was one element that I wanted to add at the time, and that was audio, sound. But that is a whole other dimension in its own right.
Yeah, sometimes less, sometimes that might take away, but yeah, another area to explore there, isn't it? But that might take away from the kind of intensity of the
or maybe I think sound might even be a separate thing, where there is no imagery, it's just in a black space. You walk into a black space and you hear the sound. Maybe that's another thing to explore in the future, or a combination of the two.
So is this, because people obviously don't know, and you don't need to go into the whole backstory, but obviously it's about...
Why not?
Because we'll be here forever.
30 minutes later.
Got to get back. But, you know, your story of grief and loss, I mean, obviously grief doesn't go away, does it? But the time has obviously given you a different perspective on how you've approached it.
I'd say it goes back to losing my father in the year 2000. It was probably three years after that I was going through most of my grieving process. And I got a sketchbook and I started drawing these abstract images in paint and oil pastel. Because I was having these like visions come to me, in my dreams, and also like waking, almost like mild hallucinations. It was quite interesting. It wasn't frightening, it was quite interesting to see these hidden spaces. It was like the emotions were almost translated into some visual field, and I was seeing these forms. So it didn't make a lot of sense. So I embarked on doing a sketchbook at the time, and I think I filled half a sketchbook of material, but it was too painful to proceed with at the time, so I had to shelve it. And I probably would have put that book away and never looked at it again, except when I started the Masters, and I had strong intentions to possibly restart that work. And I think after nearly 20 years, it felt like a safe space, a safe distance from the event. I was able to properly look back at it with perspective and create a whole body of work surrounding it.
That's interesting. You
quite
said
landscapey, ethereal spaces.
You talk. I mean, your paintings seem to have quite a lot of kind of portal elements to them. And you were talking about when you're talking about emotions. You know, that the emotions almost create a portal to feel a different set of unusual energies surrounding grief and loss. And
it was a very profound space. It's almost like I often think it's a space that's almost beyond our senses. It's beyond touch, smell, sound, vision. It's almost on the periphery of our animal senses. So I was trying to touch on. So it's almost like being a quantum physicist, trying to see this other side, the other side of, I suppose, the envelope, the edge of where life meets death, that in between space. It was almost like I was fascinated with that realm. That what is that fine line between living and not living, between something and nothing. I think.
Yeah, which you can really see in those works. They're fascinating to watch, aren't they? They're kind of, they really suck you in that way. But it is interesting, isn't it? How do you, because I can remember you saying the painting's just, it's in that empty space, there is a huge amount of energy. And I suppose that's what, maybe I don't want to talk for you, but that feels like between the paintings and that, when they're sat together, you're almost getting a little bit of a way into the energy that is in that, what would you imagine is a completely black, dead, quiet space. And actually, whether that's our emotions bring that energy, or whether something else, realms. Or you're also very into the science and of things, and quantum physics and stuff like that. Yeah, there's always the kind of unseen, which is why this conversation fits so well with not knowing, obviously. And it would be great, wouldn't it?
We don't know.
It would be great to see if Inga would be up for having a chat about the whole area as well, and whether it would sit.
That would be great, wouldn't it?
Yeah, for this conversation. And also my friend Sian, who is a celebrant, and deals, her work is a very interesting area where you're talking to people about rites of passage and a lot of funerals, as well as weddings and different celebrations, and ways of making those spaces and emotions accessible. And I think that's probably another thing, isn't it? We're not allowed to. Grief forces us full frontal to face stuff. Oh wow!
What have you seen?
A buzzard. Ooh.
Woodpecker?
No, big buzzard's just landed on the branch outside. So we sit in this bird hide, but we hear a lot of birds, but you don't actually see many. And there's a beautiful woodpecker holes.
It's actually the perfect office.
The portals to another space for the birds. But yeah. So I suppose in contrast, butt in.
Sorry,
Robin.
I'm pouring a coffee.
Butt in, Robin. You want to?
I need some
brain.
I need some brain juice.
Yeah, we're a bit can't find our words today. But if I
unusual.
Take over from Rob's to give him a bit of space, and then he'll carry on talking about it. But I suppose in contrast to Rob's stuff, is that my work, I'm talking like I know about grief, but I feel actually my experience of grief and loss is a bit of a non-experience, really. I think the not knowing bit is my experience. So I lost my mum as a baby, or as a I think I was under 3. So mine is more about never having. It's a grief for something I never had, I suppose. So it's a grief for the mothering or the nurturing And so it's almost a reversal, you know. Rob had a fear. Oh, no, don't let me talk for you again, Rob.
That's
but
all right.
It's that, you know, you've lost someone that you'd built a relationship with. But mine is almost a take on a loss of what could have been. So it's that. And then similar to Rob, my works, you know, some people might look at the films and say, well, how is that about loss or grief? So the films are of charcoal based materials. So I've carbonised paper in both in one film.
Because you're an amazing painter. You're a painter, aren't you? Originally, that's what your work was.
I mean, we've yet to do my recording about my sort of background and stuff. So yeah, that'd be a good thing to do as well. But yeah, I started off as a painter, and then I had children, which obviously turns you inside out. And I suppose that was the point, and spits you back out again. But that's the point at which my work kind of was morphing into the more, rather than a 2D realm, a more physical, obviously, because birth and those things create a very physical version of yourself, and you are kind of transformed. And although I'd been working like that with my paintings, it was, you know, it was who am I as a person? Who am I as
You've gone through a huge transformation as a creative as well.
It's another one of those rites of passage, which is where it's interesting, isn't it? But also, that is the point where most people, most women and men will go, if there's somebody not there, like your father or your mother, that is the point when you have children, you go, they're really not here, you know, and what would it be like if they were here? And, you know, I didn't get taught how to be mother, you know. I was going on instincts, which I didn't feel, you know, I had particularly. Anyway, I digress. But so I moved from painting to making a lot of messy work, really, which, you know, working with paper and handmade inks, using oak gall and things, and then using a book press and like squeeze it. There was a lot of squeezing and ripping and piercing and all those sorts of things as I was finding my way through that. And a lot of, you know, I'd made a work that was very animated. You know, you put your head through holes and you moved parts. You know, there was moving parts, and I played a little bit with some animation of moving works as well, like stop motion. But then I found charcoal, and
how did you find the charcoal? How did you discover the charcoal?
Well, that was so during lockdown when we were.
What's it called? Pyrolysis, is that it?
Pyrolysis is the sort of process of cooking organic materials and turning them into, it's not pure carbon, it's kind of, they call it amorphous carbon, so it's a mixture of elements, but it is basically carbon. And if you put anything organic up to sort of 400 to 600 degrees and you cook it in an air restricted space, you'll end up with everything turns to this sort of black carbon. And I think it was I got into that through going on a course with Annie Hogg over in Ireland, and she's just amazing. And she's also since gone on to make sculptural pieces with her work, and I think she is a sculptor. Her background is that, but she uses lots of lake pigments. She's just a real expert in making your own inks out of organic materials, and she just shows us how to make some charcoal so we could make some black inks, but that process was the bit that got me, really. I was absolutely fascinated with the idea that you put something, you know, you can put a green leaf in, you know, something that you regard as still living, even though it's not, because it's not alive anymore, but it is of, you know, it's organic, of life, and then you put it through this process and it's completely transformed. And I think it was the process that I was trying to capture So even in the films, it was like you've got something that's animated. So, us, for example, and then we die, and then we become sort of inanimate objects. But then when you put something through the pyrolysis process, there's all this energy released. And even the smallest thing, even, a leaf, releases all this amazing amount of energy. And you think, well, and this is, all linked in with the carbon cycle and CO2 and all those sorts of things, and very much can be linked in with climate, which is why my work's gone down that line into sort of land art and talking about carbon sequestration, which is storing carbon for the future. But it's where does that energy go? And I think it's that transformation. And then, so the films came about from trying to, something's animate, then inanimate, and so, seemingly dead. But even decaying stuff has energy, doesn't it? And then when you put it through the pyrolysis process, which is like they call it destructive distillation, it's like a fast forward of the decay process. And then you end up with this material amorphous carbon, which is just black dust, and then you're very much in the realms of, space and time, and what we're all essentially made up of, this black dust from, imploding stars, dying stars, and it's this huge full circle, isn't it? And it was that I think I was fascinated with. The films came about because I'd made this they're very beautiful aesthetic things when you turn something to charcoal. A bramble or a rose stem with thorns on it, there'll be beautifully metallic thorns, and everything is intact if you put a single leaf in and pyrolyze, through the pyrolysis process and carbonize it, turn it to charcoal. Basically, it's obviously completely fragile and ephemeral and temporary, but it is a perfect version of itself, but slightly shrunken, slightly smaller, because all that energy's gone. So the films were about reanimating. Am I the physical? So using the material. So I had got blackthorn, and I was just crushing it. And obviously there was I think I was up on a mountain, feeling, as you do. I have kind of cyclical blueies, and I go up onto a big mountain, and it's got quite a lot of hawthorn trees, and they're big spiky beasts as well. And I can remember it being really windy, and I was just stood under this tree, and one of the spikes was just sort of pressing on my face, just sort of indenting the skin. And I think that's where it came from. I was kind of fascinated by that kind of, and I don't think it's not about the thorns or hurting myself, but there's some sort of pressure there, isn't there, with the delicateness of the skin and something that looks like it could be painful, that engages us. And then when you crush the thorns in the film, it's my energy versus this, it is all the same material. My hands are the same material as this black powder. And it was trying to bring back something to life, you can think about, my psyche. Don't go too much into that. Don't psychoanalyze me. But, there's
I often wonder how much we probably influenced each other as well, because we were basing work coming from a similar place, and we're also living together at the same time as both doing a master's degree.
It's quite intense,
and
wasn't it?
I remember sometimes being keenly interested in what Billie was creating, but at the same time trying to imagine myself living on an island in the Pacific somewhere, as far away as possible. So we were trying not to influence each other too much, but I often wonder what would have happened if we'd worked in total isolation from each other. What would have come up with the same things, or?
I don't know. Did we?
I often wonder about that because we must have influenced each other in a subtle way, I think.
Yeah, I mean, the second one of my films isn't actually. I'm not involved in that. You know, the first
Which film was that?
physical carbon was The Thorns on My Hands. The second film that Inga wanted to put them both side by side, so I called it Carbon Connection in the end, just to sort of cover both films. But the other film was The Journey Matters, which was a carbonised piece of paper that was then set alight from both ends, and it, you know, the ash line basically and the burn line crept towards each other, which almost could be a landscape or a skin, but again it's these 2 points of energy over a non-energy space going and meeting. I think when I was making them, I wasn't thinking about this work's about death and loss, but I'm so sort of engaged in the process. It was about charcoal. It was about what happens when you make it. What do you have at the end? I'm feeling like this end material, although it was beautiful, it was the bit in the middle. It was the transformation. It was this energy moving off or transforming that I wanted to capture. And other than actually filming, you know, your fire and which is also part of it, how do you capture the energy? That was what it was about, really. But then on reflection, and you have conversations, as with a lot of work, it's always like down the road you go, ooh, that was a bit obvious what I was going through at the time or what I was processing, because we don't realise we're processing a lot of our personal stuff through our work half the time. Or I'm kind of glad I don't, but yeah, it's kind of pretty obvious. It's kind of a death. Life, death, life, death, life, death.
Tell me to nab out, but I was just, while you've been talking, it's fascinating to listen to Billie speak about her process and the inspiration behind her work. I've just had some bizarre idea. I just thought when you're going through when the object in the tin, in the kind of almost airtight tin, is undergoing pyrolysis in the fire, obviously something's ejected, isn't it? Gases and
all sorts of gases and moisture. Yeah.
Yeah, I was just suddenly thinking if there's a way of, tell me to shut up, of tapping that off into a glass vessel.
Well, they do.
Would it be coloured? Would it have a tar in it? What would it have in it?
No, they do capture it. I mean, this is the whole thing.
I was just thinking if you could capture it, then that could become a piece of work as well, because it's part of it. So you could display maybe a piece of work.
Yeah, I mean that's
with a glass bottle full of the.
That's the science connection, really, because in the scientific realm, I mean they make. So I've had the opportunity to use a couple of big retorts where they make biochar, which is another real good carbon mitigation. They're putting a lot of money into that area at the moment, so it's quite interesting. So I'm kind of connected to the biochar demonstrator project, which is through Nottingham Trent University. They got myself and Miranda Wall on board just to give a artist's perspective on the more than human in kind of research terms. So biochar is again, it's turning organic mass, so like crop residues or stems from crops or things like that, or wood or cordage or leaf litter, into carbon basically. So rather than your traditional bits of charcoal stick, it could be anything organic, rice husks, all sorts of things that would normally get chucked away or just put on the ground to give off more CO2. They're now turning it into biochar, which is turning it into carbon, which is then fixing that carbon. And then if you put it used in agriculture, if you put it on the field, you're putting that carbon back into the ground. So this is a huge area of research at the moment. I can't remember why I started saying that. What did you say?
I can't remember.
we're in that mode today.
It was something about. I was just talking about.
I
was just talking about trapping the gases from the process.
Yes. So in a kind
like
of
a chemistry set.
Yeah. So in the retorts that they use, and the big boys, use huge pieces of kit, and they tap off the tars and the physical materials, and in a traditional charcoal kiln or stack, that would come out the bottom, and they'd use that, and then the gases, they can tap off the gases, and they use that for energy, so you're capturing everything that's released rather than it being released into the atmosphere. You're reusing that energy. So that is the scientific process of it. They're on to all of that. I suppose it's I don't know whether I'm fascinated by the science side of things. And it's
I think that's where I got to as well, was reading lots of books on consciousness as well, and metaphysics and quantum physics. Kind of gets you interested in what is reality, what is thought, what is matter. It's it creates more questions than it answers, doesn't it?
Yeah. So what do you? I mean, having been forced in a way to reflect, we're in a state in our sort of life where we're kind of catapulted forward without having time to reflect, just because of life is like family life, and so because we've been forced to look back at these films now.
Time's moved on very quickly since I made them. I think it's 2021. End of 2021 I made those. So
do you feel like is that somewhere that still needs to be?
Yes, I think, I was only just thinking while you were talking about your work, that I think there's a possibility of, I think I could make 3 more of those films. Eidolon 4, 5 and 6 possibly. I did actually start number 4 on the MA. I remember there's a folder with some bits and pieces in, but I just left it at 3. So
how do you think? Because
there's definitely a way forward with it. It's something I'd like to experiment with is sound with them as well. It doesn't have to be complex sounds, but I think that some of them do need a soundscape element. Another area I'd like to explore as well is actual virtual reality as well. If I could make them 3D, that you can kind of go into these spaces. I mean, that's a technology that I've not got much experience with, especially working with. But maybe that's something in the future that I need to look into, because I feel like either you need to walk into a 3D room that's got projections on all the walls all the way around you. That's what I was going to say to you.
How would you want it viewed?
So you can walk into the space, which I think would probably lend itself more to that.
So in an ideal world...
But VR and a headset would actually work too. I mean, then you could stream it online and people could, if they got a VR headset, experience it from home.
So in an ideal world, would you, in your ideal exhibition space, how would you have them seen? You would have, a smaller space with them, so you could sort of stand in the middle and have them all around you?
I'd like to have them projected inside a cave. Yeah, Imagine a futuristic cave art, but about something that's primal and has always been with us. Life and death. Yeah, I think that would be a space that would lend itself quite well to it. If you could find, I don't know how many caves there are around here, but if we could find one that's large enough, that's something to look into,
isn't it?
Yeah. So there's some kind of 3D projection system that would project the work all around you in a cave, maybe multiple projectors, and you could walk through the cave system and actually see it all around you on the walls. It's all these shimmering lights and dots and strange spaces. Yeah, I think that's just an idea that came to mind just then. I was thinking about traditional gallery space, but sometimes that doesn't necessarily lend itself to everything, and I think that would put it more into the right context. I think.
I suppose that was the other thing I didn't say about was that my two films were put side by side, and that was quite difficult, when you make something that you haven't really thought about showing
really
it.
Well.
Yeah, showing it like that. But one had sound and one didn't. One played sound played a very, very important part in physical carbon, and I'd even created a paper drum that the blackthorn, carbonised blackthorn, fell onto.
Oh, that works so well.
The sound, and it's never really been shown in a setting that I felt did that justice in a way. And I always imagined that space, or even, I don't know, even maybe even a headset, so you have the sound in the headset, but to be in quite a small room, to sit with that film, and the sound be really, because it's quite resonant sound. Again, that was trying to reanimate it through sound and my physical force. And I'm quite crap with names as well. Like Rob comes up with beautiful names for his work, and I just went, "What is it? It's physical carbon." So not particularly clever, but and the other one was The Journey Matters, which was, the journey on exploring carbon and how the process was what mattered, not the resultant work in a way. It's always the process is more exciting than the finale in a way, or the physical work at the end. It's that journey. So that again, pretty unexciting, but. So The Journey Matters is that reference, really. But yeah, I think I'd love to have that work in. So if anybody knows anywhere that would love to have that piece of work, physical carbon, with the sound up in a small space, that would be fabulous. And Rob's all around you.
I'm sort of open to my works being shown not necessarily in caves. That kind of limits it a little bit, but yeah, I was just thinking out loud there. Sometimes.
What's the cave of the future? What would a cave look like in the future? What's a contemporary cave?
I like the idea of the future.
Maybe like a railway tunnel.
Yeah.
Or, some sort of tunnel.
It could be an industrial space, couldn't it? A human-made space.
A tunnel. Yeah. Anybody got any ideas? Do let us know. Is there anything else you want to say? I don't know how long have we been wittering on
it's
for?
Fine. It's 31 minutes.
Oh yeah. Well, we don't need to go too crazy.
No, I think...
Have we covered everything?
We've got to wrap it up in a minute. I think I covered most things. I think there's probably a bit more I could say about my inspiration behind the paintings that I've produced and the animations, but...
I think we'd rather you kind of see the films, and it's interesting knowing how we made them and the link to Lost.
But it's the emotional and intellectual impact, I think. I'm interested to hear how people translate it, how they see it. Yeah.
So if you look at the films and you've listened to this and you want to get in touch, we'd love to. Another thing
I've talked with people about before is have other people gone through a grieving process and had these visions and seen these things. That's something that interests me. Is it something that
it doesn't get talked about?
Something that's widespread, is it something that people don't generally talk about?
Or don't allow themselves to access necessarily.
Because I suppose being an artist, you tend to become interested in these things, don't you, and talk about them and express them in make a record of it, which is what I've tried to do. So yeah, that's something that interests me. I've not met anybody yet who's seen them and gone, oh, I've actually, when I grieved for my grandparents, I had these visions of these dots and these strange spaces.
Yeah, and I think this would be so it'd be interesting to talk to Inga about that, and whether when you've got a group of people that have all made work about. Unfortunately, we weren't able to make the Bath screening, but
I was really, really upset to not be able to make that.
Yeah, but
shame.
If a room full of people that have all made work about a similar, did it? Yeah, it would be really interesting.
It's just getting feedback, isn't it? Giving each other feedback on our work. And
to hear what other people's take on the work is.
Because on the internet, it's a bit lost, isn't it? I know I get traffic. I know I've seen so many thousand people have watched the films on my website. They've been to the page, but no one leaves a comment or writes you a letter.
And if you want to get in touch with us, please do email us and just leave us some feedback. It'd be really interesting. Or if you've made work on a similar line that you think's relevant.
That'd be great.
It'd be really interesting to know and make these connections. And I think Inga's going to try and move this sort of curation forward as well. So we will let people know about that. Okay then, are we signing off?
Let's finish the coffee and sign off.
Cheers.
Thanks for listening.
Oh no.